curiosity is a dangerous thing. It led you here. You can still turn back, or you can prove your nerve. Hit subscribe, smash that like button, and let's begin our descent into a story from which not everyone returns.
The ocean was supposed to be endless. At least, that's what Marcus thought when he saw nothing but blue on the horizon. Blue sky, blue water, and the endless rhythm of waves breaking against the half-destroyed lifeboat. It had been 2 days since the storm. 2 days since their yacht, the Selene, sank into the dark heart of the Pacific. The 5 survivors were now shadows of who they used to be. Marcus, the tall, broad-shouldered son of a millionaire. Liam, his best friend and the loud joker of the group. Tyler, the quiet one who rarely spoke but never panicked. Sarah, strong-willed and practical. And Chloe, the youngest, whose bright optimism was fading with every hour under the burning sun. No one spoke anymore. The air reeked of salt and sweat, and the sound of seagulls had vanished the day before. A bad omen, Marcus thought. "Land!" Tyler's cracked voice suddenly cut through the wind. All heads turned. At first Marcus thought it was a mirage, just another cruel trick of dehydration. But no, it was real. A dark line at the edge of the world. Mountains, trees, an island. They paddled with what strength they had left, driven by instinct more than hope. By sunset, the lifeboat scraped against the sand of a narrow beach. The island was massive, far bigger than any of them expected. Dense jungle rose up immediately from the shore, and somewhere within it strange bird calls echoed like whispers. Marcus stumbled onto the sand, collapsing on his knees. Sarah followed, helping Chloe out of the boat. Liam dropped beside them, laughing in relief. "We're alive! We actually made it!" But Tyler was staring past them, at the dark forest ahead. "No birds. No insects either. You hear that?" They all listened. The jungle was silent. Except for the distant crash of waves, there was nothing. That was the first sign something was wrong. By morning, they explored the beach. The island stretched for kilometers in both directions, with jagged cliffs at the far ends. No signs of modern life, no houses, no shipwrecks, no debris. Only untouched sand and thick, overgrown vegetation. Sarah, who had studied environmental science, noted something strange. "There are species here I don't recognize. Some of these plants look prehistoric." Chloe ran her hand along a tree trunk. The bark was smooth, almost too perfect. "Maybe this place was never on the map," she said quietly. Marcus frowned. "That's impossible. Every piece of land in the Pacific has been mapped for decades." Tyler pointed toward the dense center of the island. "Then explain why there's smoke coming from there." They froze. It was faint, a thin gray line rising above the trees, vanishing into the low clouds. Liam forced a laugh. Maybe there are people here. Locals, or some kind of station." But no one shared his enthusiasm. They decided to move inland after building a small shelter on the beach. Sarah kept a journal, marking their direction with carved notches on trees. The deeper they went, the more wrong everything felt. The air grew thicker, the temperature dropped, and the ground was soft, almost spongy, as if the earth itself was breathing. Every few minutes, someone thought they heard movement, footsteps that stopped the moment they turned around. Once, Chloe swore she saw a figure between the trees. pale, motionless, watching. When they ran to check, it was gone. By the second day of exploring, they found something unnatural. A stone structure, half buried under vines. It wasn't large, but it looked ancient, older than anything built by man in the last few centuries. The stones were cut precisely, forming an archway leading into darkness. It was a cave, or more like a mouth. Marcus felt a shiver crawl down his spine. This place, it's like it's waiting for something. Sarah knelt beside the entrance, running her fingers along the carvings on the stones. These symbols, I've never seen anything like them. Chloe pointed to one of the symbols, a spiral that ended in what looked like a human skull. Maybe we shouldn't go in, she whispered. Liam scoffed. Come on, you really think some old cave is haunted? Tyler didn't laugh. He was staring into the blackness beyond the archway. Haunted or not, he said, something's alive down there. They decided to wait until morning before exploring. But that night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He woke to the sound of whispering, faint like wind passing through a hollow shell. When he opened his eyes, the others were still asleep, except Tyler, who was sitting up, staring toward the jungle. What is it? He whispered. Tyler didn't look at him. Something's walking outside our camp. Marcus listened. The jungle was still, but then a crunch. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Maybe it's an animal. No animal walks like that. They saw it only for a second, a silhouette moving just beyond the edge of the firelight, tall, human-shaped, but wrong. The limbs were too long, the head tilted unnaturally to the side, and then it was gone. The next morning, they found tracks in the dirt. Not animal, human, barefoot. But there was one more thing. Next to their campfire lay a skull, half buried in the sand, clean, dry, untouched by decay. Chloe screamed. Sarah covered her mouth, trembling. Marcus tried to rationalize. Maybe it washed up from the sea. But deep down, none of them believed that. They decided to leave the beach and head toward the cave. It was the only place that offered any sort of shelter. As they approached, Marcus felt the air grow colder again. The wind howled through the trees like a warning. The entrance gaped before them like the throat of some sleeping god. Sarah turned to him. We shouldn't go in there. Marcus looked at the others. They were exhausted, hungry, terrified, but staying outside felt worse. Just a quick look, then we decide. They stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. Their flashlights illuminated walls carved with scenes of death, sacrifice, and something descending from the sky. The deeper they went, the more bones they saw, stacked neatly, arranged in impossible patterns. Tyler's voice echoed in the darkness. This isn't a cave. It's a tomb. And then they heard it. A sound that froze their blood in their veins. A faint, hollow breath coming from somewhere deep below. Sarah's flashlight flickered. Chloe clutched her arm, whispering, "Did you hear that?" Marcus raised his light toward the tunnel ahead and saw eyes. Dozens of them. Blinking. Watching.
The air inside the cave was thick, not with dusts, but with something heavier. It pressed on their lungs, making every breath sound like a whisper in a cathedral of the dead. The flashlights flickered as if the darkness itself was alive, feeding on the light. Marcus led the group deeper, though every step echoed like a warning. Behind him, Sarah tried to record everything on her phone. The carvings, the structure of the walls, the strange way the stones seemed wet, even though there was no moisture in the air. Liam walked next to Chloe, trying to sound calm. "You realize how rich we'll be when we tell this story, right? A secret island, an ancient cave? This is Discovery Channel level." "Shut up," Sarah hissed. "You're echoing through the tunnels." Her voice didn't bounce back the way it should have. Instead, it came back distorted, deeper, slower, as if someone else had repeated her words. Chloe froze. "Did you hear that?" Everyone stopped. The light from their flashlights danced over the walls, catching the shimmer of bones embedded in the rock. Not scattered, not natural, embedded, as if the mountain had swallowed people whole, leaving their skeletons inside its flesh. Tyler knelt beside the wall. His fingers trembled as he brushed the stone. "These aren't fossils. These are recent." "How recent?" Tyler didn't answer. He pointed at one skull, still showing traces of dried tissue near the jaw. They continued downward. The passage widened into a massive chamber big enough to fit a cathedral. The air grew colder, the silence denser. The only sound was the distant dripping of water, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. At the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, surrounded by hundreds of small piles of bones. Candles, long extinguished, were melted into the stone, their wax hardened into black tears. Sarah's flashlight trembled as she panned it over the carvings around the altar. They showed rows of human figures kneeling before something colossal, a shadowy mass descending from the sky, its limbs stretching across the earth. The figures below it had no faces. "This wasn't a natural civilization," she whispered. "This is ritualistic, sacrificial." "Do you mean like cult stuff? Maybe some old tribe?" "No tribe did this," she said. There was a pause. Then, from somewhere beyond the altar, came the faint sound of movement. Soft, wet, dragging. Tyler gripped his flashlight tighter. "We're not alone down here." They backed away slowly, but the sound grew louder, something scraping against the stone, getting closer. Marcus raised his flashlight towards the sound. For a brief moment, he saw it. Something moving on the ceiling. It looked human at first, but it crawled upside down, its limbs too long, its skin gray and tight like leather pulled over bone. Its eyes reflected the light, not like an animal's, but like glass catching fire. "Run," Marcus whispered. The creature hissed, a sharp, rattling sound that echoed through the chamber, and then it dropped. They scattered. Flashlights hit the ground, beams spinning wildly across the walls. The creature's movements were fast, jerky, unnatural. Tyler tripped over a pile of bones. Sarah grabbed him by the arm, pulling him toward a side passage. Chloe screamed as the creature's hand brushed her hair, a hand with fingers too long, ending in sharp black nails. Marcus swung a broken torch at it. The wood struck its shoulder, but instead of blood, a dark liquid seeped out, thick, tar-like, and burning with a faint glow. The creature recoiled, shrieking, and disappeared into the darkness above. For several seconds, no one moved. Only their ragged breathing filled the silence. "What the hell was that?" Chloe cried. Tyler swallowed hard. "Something that shouldn't exist." They regrouped deeper in the side tunnel. Sarah's hands shook as she tried to light one of the old candles they'd found. The flame flickered weakly, barely illuminating their faces. Marcus looked around. "We can't go back the way we came. That thing's guarding the entrance. So what then? We just keep going deeper? It's either that or die up there, Marcus said. Chloe wiped tears from her cheeks. We should have never come here. They moved forward again, following the faint airflow that suggested another exit. The tunnel sloped downward, the stone changing from rough volcanic rock to something smoother, almost carved by hand. Strange symbols lined the walls, glowing faintly when their lights passed over them. Tyler stopped, examining one closely. These aren't carvings. They're veins. The rock is alive. Sarah scoffed nervously. That's impossible. But as they moved, the veins pulsed faintly, a soft, rhythmic glow, in sync with the distant sound of the dripping water. They finally reached a cavern so large, their lights couldn't reach the far walls. The ground was uneven, scattered with debris, not stone, but remnants of metal, rusted tools, even what looked like part of an old research crate. Marcus knelt beside it, brushing off the dust. U.S. Navy, he read aloud. The logo was faded, almost erased by time. Liam's eyes widened. The Navy? You're saying people have been here before? Tyler nodded slowly. And they didn't make it out. Chloe picked up a small notebook lying half buried in the dirt. The pages were wet and torn, but a few words were still legible. Depth readings inconsistent. Sound coming from below. Evacuate. She closed it quickly, her face pale. They heard it too. Heard what? No one asked out loud. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had started to warp. Every sound carried an echo that didn't belong to them. Once Marcus swore he heard Sarah's voice behind him, whispering his name. But when he turned, she was ahead, silent. At one point, the tunnel narrowed, forcing them to crawl. The air grew damp, heavy with the stench of rot. When they emerged on the other side, they found themselves standing on a ledge overlooking a massive pit. It stretched down into endless blackness. The sound they'd heard before, the dripping, the echo, now pulsed louder, like the heartbeat coming from the earth itself. Sarah looked at the others, terrified. This is the center. The entire island is built around this. Tyler peered down. It's not a cave. It's a grave. Something moved below, a slow ripple in the shadows. Then another. And another. Dozens of shapes, human or once human, began to stir. Their faces glowed faintly in the dark, skin translucent, bones visible beneath them. And as they looked up, their mouths opened in silent screams. Chloe stumbled back, covering her face. They're still alive! No, Marcus said, voice shaking. They're awake. The ground trembled, dust falling from the ceiling like ash. The echo beneath the earth grew louder, no longer a sound, but a vibration, like the heartbeat of something ancient awakening. Liam grabbed Marcus's arm. We need to get out of here. Before he could finish, a deep, resonant voice filled the cavern, not through their ears, but directly inside their heads. You found what was never meant to be found. The candle in Sarah's hand extinguished. Darkness swallowed them whole.
The darkness didn't just swallow them, it inhaled them. It was as if the air itself had become a living thing, pulling the warmth out of their bodies, whispering in voices that weren't theirs. Marcus stumbled forward, trying to ignite the flashlight again. The beam flickered weakly, then steadied, a thin thread of light in an endless void. "Sarah," he called out. Her answer came from somewhere to his right, shaking. "I'm here! Liam's with me!" Tyler's voice echoed faintly from the left. "Don't move too fast! The ground isn't solid here!" The echo of his words came back, but distorted, not repeating, mocking. "Solid here! Here! Here!" And beneath the echo, a faint, wet breathing sound. Marcus turned his flashlight downward. The ground wasn't rock, it was flesh. At first he thought it was moss, but when the beam brightened, the truth emerged. The floor was made of a tangle of pale, half-formed bodies fused together. Eyes opened within the mass, rolling toward the light, their mouths silently gasping for air that never came. Marcus stumbled forward, bile rising in his throat. "Don't look down!" Sarah, ignoring him, turned her own flashlight toward the wall and screamed. The walls were moving. Thousands of figures, pressed together like insects under glass, slowly shifting, their hands pushing against the stone, their fingers stretching toward the open air. Chloe fell to her knees, covering her mouth. It's the people from the island, from the ship." Liam stared, frozen. "No, there's too many. These are centuries old." Tyler's voice was hoarse. "The island doesn't bury its dead, it absorbs them." They pressed on through the pulsating corridor, each step sinking slightly into the spongy ground. The deeper they went, the louder the sound of breathing became, like hundreds of lungs expanding and collapsing in unison. The passage opened into another cavern. At the center stood a stone monolith, its surface slick and black, covered with faint symbols that seemed to move when stared at too long. Around it lay bones, mountains of them, arranged in circular patterns. Liam pointed with a shaking hand. "It's like a nest." Sarah stepped closer to the monolith, ignoring the others' warnings. Her phone camera flickered to life, casting a pale glow on the carvings. "Wait," she whispered. "These are the same markings as on the altar. The same creature descending. But this time, the people aren't kneeling. They're fighting it." As she spoke, the air in the cavern shifted, as though something massive had turned its attention toward her. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "back away, now." But before she could move, the stone beneath the monolith cracked open. A hand emerged, gray, skeletal, and dripping with that same black liquid Marcus had seen before. Then another. Then a face. Hollow-eyed, skin stretched tight across its skull. The creature dragged itself out of the pit, its movements deliberate, almost regal. Its jaw opened, and a low gurgling sound escaped, like air escaping from a drowned corpse. Sarah dropped her phone. The light hit the creature's face, and for a brief, horrifying second, she saw her own reflection there, twisted and lifeless. It stepped forward. Every bone in its body creaked like breaking wood. Liam raised a metal pipe he'd found earlier, swinging it desperately. It connected with a hollow thud, sending black fluid splattering across the floor. The creature barely reacted. Instead, it turned its head toward him, studying him like a curious animal. Tyler grabbed Sarah, pulling her away. "Move! Go!" They ran toward a side passage, their flashlights jerking wildly. Behind them, the sound of dragging followed, slow and steady, like footsteps dragging through mud. They reached what looked like a chamber filled with old crates and tools, the remains of a research expedition, equipment covered in dust and corrosion. Marcus ripped open a container, finding a flare gun inside. "Perfect," he muttered. "We've got one shot." "Do it," Tyler said. They waited. The sound of dragging stopped. The air was dead quiet. Then from the tunnel's mouth, the creature appeared, crawling, its limbs bending in unnatural ways. Its face had changed, no longer hollow, but forming Sarah's features. Marcus fired. The flare hit the creature's chest, erupting into white fire. The monster screamed, not a human sound, but a chorus of thousands of voices howling in unison. The flames spread across its body, and the walls around it pulsed, as if the entire cave was reacting in pain. The floor split beneath them. They fell, tumbling through a shaft that felt endless. Rocks and bones clattered around them, the air roaring past. When they hit the bottom, it was in shallow water, ice cold and black. Marcus coughed, struggling to breathe. Around him, the others groaned, bruised but alive. The flare still burned faintly above them, illuminating the cavern. Except it wasn't a cavern. It was an underground sea, stretching beyond sight. The ceiling glowed faintly, as if moonlight filtered through miles of stone. Floating in the water were hundreds of bodies, perfectly preserved, their faces peaceful, as though sleeping. Sarah whispered, "They look alive." Chloe began to cry softly. "We need to get out. Please, Marcus, there's no treasure, no secret, just death." Marcus stared ahead. The water rippled. One of the bodies opened its eyes. Then another. Then another. Dozens of eyes turned toward them, glowing faintly blue beneath the surface. Tyler backed away. "No, no, they're—" The water exploded. Pale hands shot up, grabbing at their legs, pulling them down. Screams filled the cavern as they thrashed, kicking, clawing. Marcus felt cold fingers wrap around his throat, dragging him beneath the surface. Under the surface, everything was silent, just endless faces, mouths open, screaming without sound. Then he saw it, far below, a massive shadow moving, slowly, almost gracefully. Two enormous eyes opened in the dark. The dead were not alone down here. And as Marcus's vision faded, a thought crossed his mind. Maybe the cave wasn't a tomb at all. Maybe it was a womb. The mouth of the cave yawned before them, a black wound in the island's heart, swallowing the light as if it despised it. Rain still fell, though softer now, and mist clung to the entrance like pale smoke. The remaining survivors, Michael, Leah, and Tomas, stood in silence. None of them spoke about what they had seen the night before, the flickering shadows that moved even when the fire was out, or the whispers that came from the jungle when no wind was blowing. Michael took the first step inside. The ground sloped down sharply, slick with moss and sand. Their flashlights trembled, weak beams cutting through the dark. The air grew colder, heavier, every breath thick, like inhaling dust from old bones. The deeper they went, the louder it became, not sound, but the absence of it. The world outside faded. The cave devoured noise, leaving only the sound of their heartbeats. After what felt like an hour, the tunnel widened. The beam of Michael's flashlight revealed massive walls glistening with mineral veins, and in the center, a hole. A black pit, circular and perfect, descending straight into the earth. Around it were carvings, primitive yet deliberate. Dozens of faces, mouths open in screams, eyes gouged out. Leah knelt to study them, her voice trembling. "These aren't carvings, they're warnings." Tomas pointed his flashlight toward the edge. Something shimmered below, faintly reflecting light. Bones. Piles and piles of them, packed so tightly they formed layers. Thousands of skulls, rib cages, and femurs. "Jesus Christ," Michael whispered. "It's a grave." But it wasn't. The skulls weren't ancient. They were fresh. Many still had dried tissue clinging to them. Some wore rusted metal tags, others fragments of torn uniforms, all from different eras. World War II, the 70s. A few looked far too recent. Leah's flashlight flickered. Then, faintly, she heard something, a whisper from below. Her breath caught. "Did you hear that?" The whisper became a murmur, then a chorus, dozens of voices moaning in unison, echoing up from the pit. The light dimmed, and a faint wind rose, not from the cave mouth, but from the hole. Michael stepped closer, mesmerized. "They're calling for help." "No," Tomas hissed, pulling him back. "They're not calling you. They're calling something else." Then the wind turned warm, rotten. The smell of decay flooded the air. Leah covered her mouth as shadows began to form around the rim, translucent shapes, human and not. The moaning grew louder. The walls seemed to pulse. Michael stumbled backward. His foot slipped, and he nearly fell into the pit. Tomas grabbed him just in time. "Run!" Leah screamed. But before they could move, the cave shifted. A deep rumble rolled through the stone. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the entrance behind them collapsed in a spray of rock and dirt. The light from outside vanished completely. Now there was only darkness and the whispers. Endless, hungry whispers.
Darkness swallowed everything. Not the kind you get when you close your eyes. This one breathed. It moved. It pulsed. It pressed against their skin like something alive. Michael's flashlight was broken. Tomas managed to keep his, but the beam flickered and buzzed weakly. Leah tried to move toward the wall, gasping for air. The stench of rot was thick enough to choke on. "Is anyone hurt?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I think I'm fine," Michael said. His voice cracked. "But the entrance, it's gone." The beam of Tomas's light caught what was left of the passage. Nothing but solid rock, freshly sealed, like the cave itself had decided to trap them. They were buried alive. Then, faintly, the whispers returned. Louder now, not from the pit, from everywhere. Thousands of soft, broken voices repeating something they couldn't understand. Leah pressed her palms over her ears. "Stop it, please!" "Listen," Tomas hissed. "They're saying names." Michael froze. Through the endless echo, he caught a word. His own name, whispered by 100 mouths, dragging each syllable like nails across stone. Michael. His blood ran cold. "Leah," he whispered, "they know who we are." The air shifted again. The ground trembled faintly at first, then harder. The pile of bones near the pit began to move. At first it seemed like the tremor was shaking them loose, but then they realized the bones were crawling. One by one, the skeletons began to shift and twist as if pulled by invisible strings. Jaws opened, fingers clawed at the stone. Skulls rolled, clicking against each other until they formed grotesque, broken shapes, faces without flesh. Tomas backed away, aiming his flashlight. "Oh, God! Oh, no, 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 no!" From the pit, a low hum arose, not mechanical, not natural. It was alive, resonating through their bones, vibrating the air until their teeth hurt. And then they saw it. A shape was climbing out, enormous, draped in shadows, its limbs fused from dozens of bodies. Human faces blinked and opened their mouths along its chest. Eyes rolled where there shouldn't have been eyes. Every time it moved, it left behind trails of black sludge that hissed like acid on the stone.
Leah screamed and fell to her knees, clutching a cross around her neck that wasn't there a week ago. Michael grabbed her and pulled her back, whispering something, anything, to keep her from breaking. The creature stopped at the edge of the pit. Its massive faces spoke as one. "You came to awaken us." And then, silence. Every whisper, every echo, gone. The thing turned its head, or what passed for one, toward them. Its many mouths formed a smile. Tomas fired a flare. The red light exploded through the chamber, illuminating the entire horror. Bones crawling along the walls, black veins pulsing through the rock, the creature's body stretching higher than the cave ceiling itself. It screamed. The sound wasn't noise, it was pressure. Leah's ears bled instantly. Tomas fell, dropping the light. Everything became red. Then, black. When Michael opened his eyes again, he was alone. The cave was silent. The pit was still. And in the red dust, where Tomas had fallen, there was only his flashlight and a smear of blood leading deeper into the darkness. The silence was unbearable. It wasn't the calm kind. It was the kind that follows a scream when the world itself seems to hold its breath. Michael stood in the middle of the cavern, the dying flashlight trembling in his hand. The air was thicker now, heavy like oil. It clung into his skin, to his throat. Every breath burned. He looked around. The flare was gone. Leah was gone. Tomas? Gone too. Only the endless blackness remained. For a long time he didn't move. Then faint footsteps echoed somewhere deeper in the cave. Bare feet, slow, dragging. "Leah?" he called out. His voice came out hoarse. No answer. He followed the sound, careful, the beam of his flashlight slicing through the dark and weak pulses. The deeper he went, the more he saw the walls weren't just rock. They were covered in carvings, primitive, uneven, like done by hand thousands of years ago. But the shapes, they weren't human. Long-limbed creatures with gaping mouths, circles around their heads, lines that spiraled endlessly downward. Michael traced one with his hand and froze. The carving was warm. Something alive pulsed beneath the rock. He stumbled back, and the beam of his flashlight caught something ahead. A hallway carved cleanly into the earth. It shouldn't have been there. It looked too perfect, too smooth, like a tunnel bored by machines. And yet, the ground was old, ancient. He entered. The deeper he went, the quieter it became. Even his footsteps stopped echoing. There was no sound at all, not even his own breathing. The air itself seemed to vanish. Then the tunnel opened into another vast chamber, and Michael's mind froze. Before him lay an underground city. Dozens, no hundreds of humanoid shapes carved from stone stood in rows, facing a massive obsidian altar in the center. Each figure was different, men, women, children, but all had hollowed-out faces. No eyes, no mouth, just deep holes where their features should have been. Michael whispered, "What the hell is this?" He stepped closer to one of the statues. The stone looked cracked, melted in places. He brushed the surface with his fingers, and the statue exhaled. Michael fell backward, heart hammering. The sound was real, a soft, wet breath. Then another, then more. The figures began to move. Stone flaked away from their bodies like old skin, revealing something pale and soft beneath. Flesh. One by one, they started turning their faceless heads toward him. Michael ran. He sprinted across the chamber, the beam of his flashlight bouncing wildly, catching glimpses of movement. Hundreds of shapes peeling themselves free, stepping off their pedestals, following him. He stumbled into another corridor, panting, slipping on wet stone. Behind him, the sound of footsteps grew louder, uneven, distorted, like bones clicking together. "Stop!" he shouted. "Stay away from me!" But the voices came again, the same whispers as before, only now closer. "Michael, Michael, you woke us." He reached a narrow crevice and slipped through, tearing his jacket. The light blinked twice, then died. Complete blackness. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a soft glow appeared ahead. It was faint, blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. Michael followed it, crawling through the tunnel until it widened again. The glow came from a lake, underground, still and perfectly round, its surface shimmering like liquid glass. And in its reflection, he saw Leah. She stood across the lake, motionless. Her hair hung wet over her face, her skin pale as wax. She didn't blink. "Leah?" he whispered. Her lips moved, but the sound came from behind him. He turned and saw her again, close, too close. Her face was wrong, eyes black, mouth torn too wide, whispering his name. "Michael, Michael." He screamed, tripped, fell backward, and plunged into the lake. The water was freezing, burning his skin like acid. He fought upward, gasping, but something wrapped around his leg, a hand, then another, then dozens. They pulled him down. The last thing he saw before the surface disappeared was Leah's face, watching from above, silent and unmoving. And beneath the water, thousands of pale faces opened their mouths, as if the island itself had come alive to devour him. Michael's lungs burned as if they'd been filled with fire. He coughed, choking up salt water, his body convulsing on the wet sand. The air was thin, sharp. Sunlight stabbed through his closed eyelids. He was alive. Or at least, he thought he was. The waves crashed softly behind him, dragging bits of seaweed and broken wood across the shore. He opened his eyes slowly. The world shimmered in a haze of white and blue. He was on a beach, but it wasn't the same island. The sand was too white, the trees too tall and thin, almost translucent in the bright light. Everything looked wrong, too clean, too still. Even the air didn't move. He tried to stand, but his legs shook. His mind swirled. Memories flashed. The cave, the statues, Leah's face in the reflection, the hands pulling him under. It had to be a dream. It had to be. But when he looked at his hands, the skin was raw, red from the salt. His nails were broken. He could feel the sting of the cuts on his arms. This was real. He staggered toward the tree line, calling out weakly, "Leah? Tomas? Anyone?" Only silence. Even the sound of waves seemed to fade the moment he stopped moving. He walked for what felt like hours. The forest stretched endlessly, trees bending slightly toward him, like they were watching. Their branches didn't sway. No birds, no insects, no sound. And then he saw it. Footprints. 5 sets pressed deep into the sand, leading inland. He knelt down, tracing one of them. Smaller. Leah's. Another pair. Tomas's boots. He felt a flicker of hope. "They made it," he whispered. He followed the trail deeper into the forest until it led to a clearing. There, in the middle, stood something impossible. A wooden cabin. It looked old, sun-bleached, half-collapsed, but smoke curled faintly from a broken chimney. "Hello?" he shouted. "Is anyone here?" The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the light dimmed. Dust hung in the air like fog. The cabin smelled of seaweed and rot. On the wall, 5 photos were pinned in a crooked row. Michael froze. Each picture showed the same 5 of them: Leah, Tomas, Eric, Rachel, and himself, but not how he remembered. They weren't laughing, not alive. They were pale, wet, standing in front of the same cabin he was in now. A low sound came from behind him, a groan, heavy and slow. He turned. Tomas stood in the doorway, but his eyes were gone. His skin shimmered with a thin layer of water, his lips moving as if he were trying to speak, but no sound came out. "Jesus, Tomas!" Michael stepped forward, shaking. "You're alive?" Tomas tilted his head. The bones in his neck cracked audibly. Then his lips moved again, and a voice not his own came out. "You shouldn't have left the water." The lantern beside the wall flickered, and for a split second he saw movement through the window. More figures, dozens of them, standing among the trees. Leah was among them, her white dress soaked, her hair clinging to her face. They all stared toward the cabin, motionless, silent. Michael stumbled back. "No, no, no, this isn't real!" He grabbed the door and slammed it shut, but the wood pulsed under his hand like something alive. The smoke from the chimney turned black, snaking down into the room, filling the air with a choking hiss. The photos on the wall began to change, their faces twisted, mouths stretching open, the eyes turned black. And then the 5th photo, his own, started to move. His reflection in the picture blinked, then smiled. Michael screamed and smashed the frame, shards flying across the floor. The photo beneath the glass showed him standing behind himself, inside the same cabin. He turned around, and there he was, another Michael, wet, pale, grinning. The doppelganger whispered, "You were never supposed to leave the water." The lights went out, and the last thing he heard before everything turned black was the sound of water dripping and something moving across the floorboards. The darkness that swallowed Michael was not empty. It was a cold, wet canvas onto which his own terror was projected. The sound of dragging was his own heartbeat, the drip of water his own ragged breath echoing back at him. He felt the thing that wore his face lean closer, its breath a foul, salty mist. "You were never supposed to leave." A memory, sharp and unbidden, cut through the panic. Not his memory, a fractured piece of Tomas's, stolen in the cave. A flare gun, the hiss of a creature recoiling. Fire. Michael's hand, trembling wildly, shot to his pocket. His fingers closed around the cold, hard plastic of his disposable lighter, a useless tool against the ocean, but now a spark. He flicked it. The tiny flame sputtered to life, a defiant sun in the absolute black of the cabin. The thing wearing his face recoiled with a sibilant hiss, its features wavering like a reflection in disturbed water. It wasn't pain, it was recognition, a reminder of a world it could no longer inhabit. In that fleeting orange glow, Michael saw the truth of the cabin. The walls were not wood, but a dense, petrified tangle of roots and bones. The floorboards were ribs. The window was a stretched, translucent membrane, and through it the figures outside were not standing. They were rooted, like pale, weeping trees. He scrambled backward, crashing through the flimsy door and out into the false daylight. The forest was a silent, watching audience. He ran, not following a path, but fleeing the memory of his own twisted reflection, the lighter clenched in his fist like a holy talisman. Deep beneath the island, in the cavern of the underground sea, the light also flickered. Sarah, Marcus, Liam, and Chloe huddled on the narrow ledge, shivering. The water had fallen still, the glowing blue eyes of the drowned once again dimmed to a soft pulse. The great shadow had sunk back into the abyss, sated for the moment. "It took Tyler," Chloe whispered, her voice hollow. It absorbed him." "It's learning from us," Sarah said, her scientific mind desperately trying to codify the horror. She held up her dead phone, its black screen reflecting her exhausted face. "The symbols in the cave, the way it mimics us, it's not just consuming bodies, it's consuming information, memories, personalities." Marcus stared at the dark water. "Tyler said, it wants to remember us." A thought, cold and clear, struck him. He turned to the others. "The research station, the Navy crate we found. They weren't just exploring, they were studying it, or trying to contain it." Liam let out a bitter, choked laugh. "Well, they did a fantastic job." "No, listen," Marcus insisted, a desperate plan forming. "They left stuff behind. Tools, reports. If we can find their base camp, their main site, there might be something there. A way to communicate, a weapon, something more than a fucking lighter." The word lighter hung in the air, and for a split second, all four of them saw the same mental image, a tiny, unwavering flame. It was a memory, but it felt borrowed, like a radio signal picked up from far away. "Gasp!" Chloe gasped. Did you see that?" Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes wide. "It's getting stronger, the connection. It's not just reading us anymore. It's starting to feed us its own thoughts, or the thoughts of the others it's caught." Michael stumbled through the unnervingly silent forest, the lighter his only comfort. The trees began to look familiar, not from his own journey, but from the fragmented memories of the cave, the carvings, the visions of the ancient people who fought the shadow. He saw a peculiar spiral-shaped leaf he recognized from a sketch in Sarah's journal, a journal he had never seen. He wasn't just walking through a forest, he was walking through the collective nightmare of everyone the island had ever touched. And then he heard it, not a whisper, but a voice, real, strained, human. "Just up ahead, I see a structure." It was Liam's voice. Michael burst through a final wall of ferns and stopped dead. He wasn't on a strange, pristine beach anymore. He was on their beach, the one where Marcus's group had first made landfall. The half-built shelter was still there, and just up the slope, emerging from the jungle, were Marcus, Sarah, Liam, and Chloe. The two groups stared at each other across the sand, a silent chasm of shared trauma between them. They were 5 again, but the 5th was a ghost haunting both their memories. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice rough with disbelief. You're from the other group, the one that went into the cave before the storm." Michael just nodded, tears of exhaustion and relief welling in his eyes. "The cave, it spit me out, but not here. Somewhere else. Somewhere wrong." Sarah's gaze was analytical, terrified. "The island is reshaping geography, or our perception of it. It's bringing us together." "It's corralling us," Liam said, the color draining from his face. As if on cue, the air grew cold. The gentle lapping of the waves ceased, the water becoming as still and solid as oil. From the edge of the jungle, figures emerged. Not the fast, jerky creatures from the deep cave. These were the ones from Michael's false beach. Leah, Tomas, and the others from his group. Their skin was pale and waxy, their eyes dark and empty, and beside them a new form materialized from the shadow between the trees. Tyler. His movements were calm, deliberate, his face a mask of serene emptiness. The real Tyler was gone. This was the island's perfect copy. The doppelganger Tyler looked at Marcus and smiled a smile that was too wide, too knowing. "You are all in the wrong story, but we can help you find the ending."